Good afternoon and welcome everybody to this week's weekly educational workshop. I don't suppose it's really a workshop. It's a session this week dedicated to Beyond Charts. So the topics that we're going to be covering on this occasion, we're going to be having a look at the favourites ribbon on Beyond Charts, how you can use that, how you can populate it and use it to your best advantage. So let's get underway. First of all, as always, the disclaimer and the content of this presentation or any other Elite Traders Club material does not constitute a recommendation, nor does it take into account your investment objectives, financial situation or particular needs. So before making any decisions based upon the general advice presented in any of our presentations, please consider whether it's appropriate in light of your financial circumstances. All right, today our topic, what is the favourites tab and how can we use it? Some of you are probably already reasonably familiar with Beyond Charts. For those of you who perhaps are just starting out or would like some extra help, then I think the Favourites tab is a very useful component of Beyond Charts, particularly if you can make it work for you. And by that I mean adding items to the toolbar that are going to actually make it more user-friendly for your own personal use. So we're going to go through adding new items to the Favourites tab, removing items and renaming items as well. So first of all, what is the Favourites tab? Obviously it's a tab within Beyond Charts, and its function really is to help make the use of Beyond Charts a little bit easier. As you would know, Beyond Charts has a number of tabs which disappear along the side panels of your screen. And it can be a little bit difficult when you're first learning Beyond Charts to navigate your way around and just become familiar with the layout of the particular platform. So by having a Favourites tab, we can actually take items from those panels that disappear down the side of the Beyond Charts screen and put them onto our Favourites tab. So the benefit of that is it just gives us a little bit more usable space on our desktop, as opposed to having windows continually popping in and popping out. The actual tabs sit within a ribbon on Beyond Charts, and that ribbon can be made to be hidden. So again, that gives us a little bit more real estate on our screen to be able to view our charts, which is a good thing. Certainly adding items. When we're adding items to our Favourites tab, we need to just make sure that the items that we're adding are in the correct format, if you like. So making sure that if we're putting on, as an example, an exponential moving average, that we've already set the parameters for that moving average before we go and add it to our Favourites bar. If we don't, then what's going to happen is that the item is going to be added to the Favourites bar with its default characteristics. So we just need to make sure that we've addressed that and made sure that we've got the desired characteristics before adding it to the Favourites bar. It's not a problem if you add it and you haven't already done that, because you can very easily unadd it, or remove it is probably a better word. Just simply through right-clicking and removing. So an example there on the screen, particularly with the line studies. Some of you might not know this, but there is actually a function where you can actually make the lines that you want to draw continuous lines. So when you click and drag onto a screen, you can draw a line and then click again and draw another line and another line without having to go back and drag another line onto the chart. So that's something that's a nice little feature as well. But we'll go through and look at some examples of this in any case. Certainly in terms of adding items to our Favourites bar, it's pretty straightforward once you understand how to do it. On any subsection of our Favourites bar, and you can see that at the moment, there's a little plus sign, and that just means that by clicking on that, if that plus sign appears, it means that you still have space left in that sub-panel on the Favourites tab. Now you will come to a point where there's no more space available in that sub-tab, and that means that obviously you can't add any more indicators, if you like, or watch lists or line studies or whatever to that particular sub-tab. So you just need to be mindful of that. As it says there, once you've got to the limit, then that little plus sign will disappear, and you'll see there under the overlay sub-tab that we've still got space in that one because the little plus sign is there, but however under the Formula Explorer there, you'll see that little plus sign has disappeared, and that's been highlighted by our little square there showing that. So that just means that you can't add any further items to that particular tab. All right, removing items, you're going to get to the point, particularly once you've been using Beyond Charts for a while, where some of your preferences, your personal choices that you choose to add into your Favourites tab, that you might want to remove them. They no longer serve you as well as they initially did, or you've changed your mind about some things and you want to remove them. And removing them is very simple, and it's a pretty common rule with Beyond Charts. When in doubt, right click, and in this case, if you happen to hover over the chosen item that you want to remove, and then just right click, a little menu will come up there, and then it'll have either rename or remove. So if you want to remove it, you just click on remove. If you want to rename it, then you just click on the rename section. And when you do happen to click on rename, a little dialog box will appear, and it will have the current name in there. And then if you want to rename it, then all you have to do is put the cursor over the highlighted area and just type in the brand new name. So you might have some shortcut names that you might like to put in there. Certainly it's a good idea to try and keep the names of your items that you're populating your Favourites tab with as brief as possible, because what will happen if you have quite long detailed names is that by the time you get 4 or 5 different items that you're adding into those sub tabs, it can't show the entire name of the item, and sometimes you're going to end up with items that are only part named because you've used too many. You've been a little bit too descriptive or a little bit verbose in terms of your item description. So you just need to be mindful of that. Well, thanks for watching. That's not quite the end of the webinar. Let's go back and let's go into Beyond Charts and have a look at some examples. So I've just brought up a chart here of Select Harvest, which is obviously a stock that's been performing very well of late, particularly in light of what the current market has done. Across the top of our screen at the moment on Beyond Charts, you'll see a number of different tabs. We've got a Home tab, a Chart tab, which I can change details from my chart, turning it into a daily chart or a weekly chart or even a monthly chart. I have the Favourites tab, which we're going to go through and spend a little bit of time on today. We've got a Systems tab, obviously, which is about running our scans, etc. And we've got a couple of other tabs as well. We do have an ETC Favourites tab that we populated probably about 12 months ago, and this is very extensive and it's very full. And you'll notice that with a lot of these shortcuts, if you like, that are in the ETC Favourites, it's a little bit difficult to know which each one of them actually does, particularly at the end here. You've got to put the cursor over the item and then still have an understanding of what those items mean. So as I was talking before, a little bit difficult if you've got long names for some of your shortcuts and they don't fit in to the relevant sub-tab. So let's go back to our Favourites tab. This is something that you can personalise, individualise yourself. So we've got Select Harvest as a chart that we've brought up, and some pretty simple indicators that we might like to apply to this would typically be our EMAs, our exponential moving averages. So if I'd like to add those, then where the best spot to add those is in our indicators section. So the first thing I need to do is just be aware of what indicators we've got. So over on the right hand side, at the top here, we've got an indicators window. So what I'm going to do for the moment is I'm just going to pin that out so that stays out and doesn't disappear. So in terms of my indicators, sometimes when you get into the indicators window, you will find that they are grouped into different classifications, whether they're trading bands there, whether to do with strength, whether it's to do with regressions, etc., momentum, whatever it may be. So to ungroup them, if we just click on this little icon with the 4 little boxes in it, then that will just list them alphabetically. And that's a lot easier for me from my point of view, because I don't have to think too much about whether the indicator is a certain type of indicator and what group it's in. It's just purely on an alphabetical basis. So I want to go down to moving averages. So in this particular example, I go down to moving average exponential. Now in this particular instance, as soon as I click on moving average exponential, you'll see in the bottom window, which is the parameter window, that it has different parameters to what I want. At the moment, it's saying that it's a 40-period exponential moving average. Now if I'm wanting to put on my shorter term one, we all know that that needs to be 21. So what I need to do there is highlight it, type in 21. So I'm changing the parameter of that, so that's going to be relevant. Now typically what we do when we're doing our moving averages, we would have our EMA, the shorter term one, typically coloured red. So what I'm going to do here is go down to the colour and change the colour into red. Now in terms of the thickness, typically the default is 1, so I typically make it either 2 or 3, just so that the line appears reasonably thick on the screen. That's probably because I'm going a little bit hard of seeing as I get a little bit older. So now that I've changed those particular parameters for the moving average, then what I can do is now add that indicator up the top here to the Favourites tab. So I do that by clicking on the plus sign and then scrolling down the list until I get to moving average exponential. A little bit further down, moving average exponential, there it is. Now what it's done is it's picked up all these parameters from the right hand side and embedded it into this sub menu on my Favourites tab. Now it's just called itself EMA. Now that's not going to make too much sense for me when I'm looking to apply a 21 period exponential moving average. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename that. Now remember, when in doubt, hover over the item and right click. I'm going to rename it and simply type in 21 EMA. So that's the 21 period exponential moving average. So likewise, I'm going to apply 2 other moving average indicators. Again, they're moving average exponential, EMA, so this time I'm going to put in our 63. Now typically our 63 we tend to choose blue. You can choose your own colours, it really doesn't matter. These are historically colours that we've used. So I've changed the parameters once more. I'm going to go up to my indicators list here on the sub menu and scroll down until I get to moving average exponential, and again you'll see that it's applied EMA. So again I need to right click, rename, and this time I'm just going to call it 63 EMA. That's fine. Doesn't matter whether you're doing capitals or little letters, lowercase, doesn't matter at all. So next one is 125. Typically is our longer term moving average, and by and large we tend to choose green for the purpose of that. So I've changed the parameters. Let's go and add this one to the list. So again, exactly the same procedure. Moving average exponential, there it is, and populating again with just a straight old EMA. So let's rename it, and this time I'll type in the front there. In fact, there, 125, and I need an E in front of that, and there we go. So we've now populated with 3 EMAs. What I might do, those other 2 are in capitals, so I'm going to rename this one and make it the same as the others. So let's do it in capitals just to keep it nice and neat. Exponential moving average. I've got 20. It doesn't. Isn't that interesting? The fact that it's still got EMA there, but that's capitals and that's lowercase. That doesn't like it. So I'm going to put an apostrophe S on the end. There we go. And they're all at least capitals with the EMA. So we've gone through and simply added those indicators. So now all I have to do is click on the 21. It's applied that to the chart, the 63 and the 125, and you'll see that obviously as a stock the way this has been performing, our moving averages are in the right order, moving up nice and sharply and starting to diverge as well. Some of the other indicators that we might also like to add to this particular chart, this is what we call the swing chart, or the indicator that actually draws in our peaks and troughs for us. So that's called a swing chart, and there's two different sorts of swing charts. There's a standard swing chart under S, but there is also a specially designed one under E that says ETC swing chart. And the difference between these two is not significant, other than the ETC swing chart goes all the way to the last candle. So we always choose that one as opposed to the standard swing chart. So we know where it is, and all here under the parameters we can change the width and the color of the line that draws the swing chart. Now typically I don't like to have it too thick because it tends to blend in a little bit too much with the candles. The color that you like to choose, that's certainly up to yourself. Typically I use blue. So in this instance I want to add it. I'm happy with those parameters, the width and the color. So now I'm just going to add that as the default there, and there it is there under my indicators list, ETC swing chart. So that's now been put in there, ETC swing CH. So we've run out of letters there. If you want to rename it again, you can right click, and I'm just going to get rid of those last two letters because they really don't mean too much in the scheme of things, and ETC swing. Now to apply that to the chart, all I need to do is click on it and you'll see it's drawn in my peaks and troughs along the way. So again, a very useful very useful tool to highlight those areas where the short-term trend changes from up to down. So that's some basic indicators, and obviously there's a whole list of indicators in here that you can go through and add to that list as well if you'd like to. The other one that's worth putting in there, I think, just initially is also your ATR trailing stop. So let's click on that one for the moment. Now when you first click on that, quite often the default can be anything from 5 up and 5 down. Now if we apply that to a chart, what it actually does is it puts on a trailing stop, but the trailing stop, because it's based on an upward direction and a downward direction, the trailing stop actually in this, with these default parameters, works on both upward trending stocks and downward trending stocks. So that would be something that you might use if you were going long or short. Now given that we are running a medium-term portfolio and only trading to the long side, then we just need to make some slight changes to the parameters of our ATR trailing stop. So the way that we do that, we know that our ATR trailing stop, that we're using a 3 times the average true range for our trailing stop. So we need to change this up multiplier from 5 to 3. Now what we also want to change is this down multiplier, because we're not going short, so we're going to change that down multiplier to 0. Okay, and so what that's going to do is it's only going to take notice of any upward movement, which is what we want to do when we're trailing a stop, and it's going to, if you like, ignore any downward movement, because remember, we never trail a stop to the downward side unless there's a dividend being declared and we know how much that dividend is, and we might need to make an adjustment to allow for that. All right, so again we've got the color and the width of our ATR trailing stop. I'm happy with those, so I'm just going to add that to our indicator list. So up the top again, indicators, ATR trailing stop, and that's going to add that to it as well. Now ATR trailing doesn't make too much sense to me, so I'm going to rename it by right clicking on rename, and I'm just going to call this 3ATR. To me that makes sense. You can call it whatever you like. So now as I apply it to the chart, in fact I might clear the chart, so right click, clear the chart, and now put on the 3ATR, and you can see that as the stock price moves up, it's calculating 3 ATRs away from the highest close, and maintaining that as a stop distance. So that's a really useful tool to help you stay in your trades, remembering that your rule is you only exit upon a close below your 3 ATR. So in this particular example here, price came down. It did go below the 3 ATR, but at the end of the week it was above, so we're still in the position as an example. Right, so that's the first cab off the rank there, looking at indicators and how we can add that to our favourites tab. The next section here, the line studies. Let's go through and have a look at some of our line studies. So we've had a look at the indicator section. Let's now move on to the line studies section. So it starts off with a number of different studies that you can go through at your leisure and have a bit of a look at. Some basics through Fibonacci. The ones that you're going to use more often than not are under this general classification. So things such as trend lines are useful. I certainly find having a rectangle drawing item is nice to have as part of your favourites. The profit and loss line is useful to just give you some approximation as to price moves. Vertical lines can be useful to have. Certainly your horizontal lines are extremely, they're something that helps out a lot when you're putting in your initial entry points, your protective stops, and sometimes any targets as well that you might like to put in. Annotations are useful for writing comments on the chart, and sometimes a stamp you can use to highlight an entry level or something that you'd like to denote or highlight on a chart. So the first one here, your trend line. Now we could simply add that trend line if we wanted to straight into our line studies list, and what that would do is that would pick up the default properties of our trend line. Now if I go through and add that one, you'll notice that it goes straight in. Now if I click on that, you'll notice that a little crosshair comes up on the screen. Now once I've drawn my line, then that's the end of it. If I want to go back and make that line longer, I can click on it, and again the pointer turns into the crosshair, and I can extend that line. However, I can't go through and draw multiple lines one after the other, and that's because the default for the trend line is just a single line. Okay, so I can't draw one line and then draw another line attached to it and another line and another line. So instead of using that particular default, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one out of the line studies. So I'm going to remove it, and it's asking me, are you sure, David, you want to do that? I'm going to click on yes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my trend line here under the line studies, but this time I'm going to click on the multi-draw mode. So I'll do that now, and whilst I've done that, now I'm going to go back to the line studies and I'm going to add my trend line. So by doing that, it means that, and I'll give you an example of this, let's clear the chart, that when I click on trend line, that I can now draw multiple lines. Okay, so if your intention is to draw multiple lines or to use this tool a number of times, it's certainly a lot easier to have that multi-draw on the trend line. So I'll just right click and clear that. Some of the other items that are good to have in our list here under the line studies are certainly a rectangle. Like having a rectangle, so I'm going to pop that one in. Rectangle is useful for highlighting areas or zones within a chart. So I click on rectangle, and it might be that I wanted to draw in areas of past resistance now acting as support, as an example, or it might be that I just wanted to with the box I might want to highlight again, because I've got the multi-draw on, areas where we've seen that where price has come up to before and tested, now acting as support in a number of occasions, and resistance to encapsulate sort of sideways movement over a period of time. So again, it will depend on whether we've got the multi-draw function on or off as to how this entity behaves when we put it under the line studies. So again, let's just clear the chart. In terms of horizontal lines, again, remembering that when we're looking to describe our trades and look for entry points and exit points, obviously we've got to have an entry point. And at the same time, I always need to have an exit point. So I always want to be able to clarify and demonstrate those on a chart at exactly the same time. So from that point of view, what I'm going to do with my horizontal line is I'm going to activate the multi-draw mode. So that means I can use the horizontal line and click on the chart twice, and it'll draw me two separate horizontal lines. So let's go through and add that to the list. Before I do, what I might do, I don't really like red all that much. I'm going to make my lines green in this particular example, and I'm going to make the thickness a little bit wider, so I'll make it a width of 2 as opposed to 1. So let's go now and add that up to the top there. So all I need to do is go down to horizontal line, and it's added it. So now when I click on the chart there, I've clicked once and I've clicked twice to put my horizontal lines on there. Some other examples I think that are worth putting on there are your annotations. So annotations usually is just a simple one click. So I'm going to add that, putting on my annotation up the top there. The profit and loss line I actually like having up there, so I'm going to put that one in there as well. And sometimes the ellipse is useful, I think, for highlighting, particularly peaks and troughs, those sorts of things. So I'll put that in as well. So there's my ellipse. So I can now drag that onto a chart and highlight certain areas. Now I can just click on the item that I've dragged on as well if I want to move that along or make it bigger or smaller in any particular case as well. Right, so we've added some line studies to our chart now, and we've put that under our Favourites tab. The next section is the overlays. So let's go down to our overlay section now. And there are a number of stock standard overlays that we've had built into Beyond Charts. And what I've done is I've actually gone through and created a new overlay myself, which I've called ASX Weekly. Now, next week we'll run a session on how to create your own individual overlays. Again, just so you can personalize it to your own particular needs. So I've created a new overlay down here, and what I'll do, just to show you what that overlay looks like, it's F9, so I could hit F9 on the keyboard, or I could just highlight it and drag it onto the chart. And by doing so, what it's actually put on here are a number of different indicators. So it's put on our relative strength comparison indicator. It's also put on our ATRs, so telling us what one ATR is and two ATRs. It's also put on our ETC swing chart, so highlighting our peaks and troughs along the way. It's put on a trailing stop for me, which is nice, and it's also put on our price volume volatility signal as well, which, remember, is a signal that when it comes up is a profit taking opportunity. So it means that should you have sufficient profit on your trade, given that when these signals go off, price tends to have a fairly high chance that it's going to retrace. It doesn't hurt to take some profits off the table, providing you've already made some decent money in the meantime. All right, so that's what that overlay looks like, and next week I can show you how to build one of those, but we'll just clear that chart. Again, very simple way to do it. Again, clicking on the plus sign, we just need to go down to where I find the name of my overlay, and I've just called it ASX Weekly Template. So clicking on that, and there it is up the top. ASX Weekly T, that's fine. I'm happy with that. I know what that means. And again, all I need to do, clicking on to the shortcut, and that saves me having to go through all the overlays. And as you can see, there's quite a number of them. It's just a shortcut way to be able to do it. So that's the overlays. The other section I think that is worthwhile having a little bit of a look at is this Formula Explorer. Now, the Formula Explorer is not on the right hand side, it's actually on the left hand side. So over on the bottom here, this little blank looking document there is our Formula Explorer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin that out, or dock it, and that way it stays out when I want to go through and look at these different headings. So you can see I've actually created a formula group that I've called DMAC, and that's got some of my own individual formulas that I've created over a period of time, simply through just dragging and dropping or adding smaller formulas together. So a little bit like Lego, putting one piece on top of the other and building some very simple formula myself along the way. Now, one of the formulas that we just saw on, in fact it's still on this chart here, is this price volume volatility signal. Again, remembering this goes off when prices become stretched. It's typically associated with a bearish candle and a relatively a significant increase in volume as well. So what I'm going to do for trade management purposes is make sure that I have easy access to this price volume volatility signal when I'm managing my trade. So all I need to do is go down the Elite Traders Club list, scrolling down until I get to the P level, so price volume, and there's price volume volatility exit for long. So you should all have that in your Formula Explorer. So we know that it's there, that's where it's located. So different ways that I could apply this to the chart. Very simply, if on my chart, if I cleared the chart, I could drag that on and that would apply it. Or even an easier way is, why not add this to the Favorites tab under Formula Explorer? So I think that's an easy way to do it. So let's go up to Formula Explorer. Let's scroll down our list till we get down to the P section. Here we go. P, Portfolio Management, Price Volume Volatility Exit for Longs. There it is. And it's popped up the top there. So price volume, again, you might want to give that a new name. So I'm going to rename it PVV. There we go. Price volume volatility signal. So that makes it nice and easy to apply that to the chart. All right, let's unpin that so we've got the whole chart now. Now, in terms of this Favorites ribbon up the top, I can actually make this disappear, and there's a little arrow at the top there that says minimize the ribbon. There we go. And if I want the ribbon to appear again, I can just click on the little down arrow and it reappears. And the other thing that I really think is necessary to add to your Favorites tab is potentially your Watch List Explorer. So I've got a number of different watch lists along the way. Currently I've got populated in there the ASX Weekly Opens and the US Weekly Opens. What I can also do is go down and have a look at to see if there's any pending watch lists as an example. So in here I've got July 13. That actually should say USA rather than ASA. So I'm going to pop that up the top there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename it. So instead of saying ASA, it should say USA as an example. So to have a look at any of these particular watch lists, then all I need to do is click on the relevant one in the list, and then what that's going to do is that's going to load any of the stocks that are currently open in the medium-term watch list. Okay, so as an example here, CZZ, this is obviously on a weekly chart. If we just zoom in, you'll see I've got my relative strength down the bottom here. So in the setup for each one of these watch lists, I've created an analysis, and that's something else we'll do on an education session as well. And price has triggered in on the 4th of May. Since then, it's moved up pretty strongly to about $14. We did have a price volume volatility signal go off the other week, and it's just starting to recover and looks like it's going to be moving back up again. So that's just an example of how we can add a watch list to the Watch List Explorer section as well. The general section, typically items that are good to have on the on this particular tab. Your 100% zoom, so you can see the entire history of the stock, and you'll see that Capilano Honey hasn't been around with us all that long, only since 2012, so it's got a fairly limited history. Be that as it may, it's certainly been a very strong performing stock. You zoom in. Each time you click on that, you can zoom in at various different levels. I can change it from being a daily chart, that's on a weekly chart at the moment, so I can convert that into a daily chart, and you'll see that big black candle the previous week and how the stock now is starting to move to the upward side. Again, because we've run out of space a little bit, you'll see that there's the zoom out and also the weekly and the daily as well. So I've got 2 dailies in there, so I might get rid of that last one, get rid of him. But you know what, I might like to put on a monthly as an example, so I can have a look at what it looks like on a monthly basis. Looks pretty good on a monthly basis, lots of white candles. I can go through and have a look and see what it looks like on a weekly basis or a daily basis. And again, that's just purely through adding by clicking on the little plus button. So hopefully that's been helpful along the way. So just giving you some examples there of different ways to add indicators or line studies, etc. to your favorites tab, how you can remove them. Again, simply right click, the menu will come up and remove, how you can rename them, and next week we'll go through and have a look at how you can create some of your own personalised studies or overlays and add those as well, and we might do a little bit of work on creating analyses. In the meantime, I'm just wondering if you've got any questions on what we've covered through today. Hopefully it's been of some use. I know that looking at the audience there's a few that you've been using Beyond Charts for quite a while, so I suspect that you probably know a certain amount of that already, but certainly if you've learnt one thing today, then it's been worthwhile. No questions at this stage? I think you all know what to do. If you do have any questions, certainly don't forget to, thanks Peter, don't forget to give us a hoy, and certainly we'll give you a handout over the phone. We'll use TeamViewer and give you some tuition, etc. But next week we'll go through and have a look at how to create some of your own overlays, again practicing that, and then also creating some analyses as well, particularly useful when you're looking at stock or trade management along the way. All right, so that's basically it for me for this afternoon. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch up with you next time on Friday afternoon for a recording of the macroeconomics session with Jeff Saffer. Bye for now.